year is 2004. Two identical rovers are falling out of space onto the red planet known as Mars. These rovers are called Opportunity and Spirit, and they are the first double rover mission to Mars. But first, how did this happen? It all started in 1955 when the space race began. This quickly led the US and USSR to make advances in spaceflight technology. While the space race was initially to show the opposing country how good their nuclear technology was, it led to the world being more and more interested in space. The US founded NASA in 1958 to have an official hub for space missions, such as shuttles, rockets, animals, and people being sent to space, including the historic 1969 moon landing. The Mariner mission were a series of probes launched to gain information on Mars in the 60s and 70s. The first lunar rover launched in 1970, becoming the first rover to leave Earth. The Viking project in 1976 brought a lander and an orbiter to Mars, with the lander being the first robot on the surface.
There was then a gap in the Mars missions until the 90s. NASA moved to learning even more about Mars. They launched a few landers and orbiters and sent the first rover mission to the Red Planet in 96. This was the Mars Pathfinder mission, which launched a small rover named Sojourner through space to Mars. Sojourner's goal was to discover as much as possible in 7 sols, Martian days. Tiny rover lasted 92. A few years later, in 2001, NASA had a much bigger and more ambitious mission, which they dubbed the Mars Exploration Rover Project, or MER for short. They wanted to put 2 large exploration rovers onto the Red Planet for 3 months, but they had a problem. The next launch window to Mars was in only 2 years, and the idea had just been conceived. NASA quickly tasked Rob Manning, lead systems engineer of the MER project, to throw together an amazing team of experts that could get the job done within the time constraints. The group of scientists and engineers got to work at NASA JPL in Pasadena, California. The rovers started out identically, but one rover would somehow pass tests that the other failed, so less changes were made to one. The rovers were named Opportunity and Spirit, with Spirit to be launched 3 weeks before Opportunity. The crew building and testing the rovers purposely gave them human-like features, such as the 2 20/20 vision cameras on the heads of the rovers, which looked exactly like eyes. The rovers were 5'2" and 185 kilograms. 6 months before the launch, the rovers were good to go, but the landing systems were still not perfect. After a few more months of perseverance, they were ready to launch. Part of Spirit was made from rubble from the World Trade Center, which fell in the infamous 9/11 event in 2001. Spirit and Opportunity, or OPI for short, launched from Earth to Mars in 1 month each of each other, with Spirit launching June 10th and Opportunity on July 8th in 2003. On the 6.5-month flight to Mars, both rovers were hit with the largest series of solar flares ever recorded, which may have damaged their internal computers. The crew back on Earth frantically tried to upload new software, which they did successfully. The true rovers landed on opposite sides of the planet, with Spirit in the big Gustav crater and OPI in the hole-in-one shot in the middle of Eagle crater in the Meridiani Planum 3 weeks after Spirit landed.
While Spirit was struggling with rough terrain in the Gustav crater, Opportunity was having massive success. Within days of landing, OPI found evidence of water in the form of hematite, a substance that forms in water. But this water would have been very acidic, and life would not be able to exist there. So the rovers kept searching for anything that could provide evidence of water capable of sustaining life. Spirit was struggling and finding only volcanic rock. Then she randomly stopped working after bumping into a boulder. The crew issued a shutdown command to reboot Spirit, but it failed. They then issued, quote, a shutdown damn it command, which shuts down the rover at any consequence, which thankfully was successful. Spirit almost ran out of battery in this process, but made a full recovery. The solar panels of both rovers were covered in dust and less effective until dust devils blew over them, which somehow cleaned them instead of making them more dirty. Both rovers successfully reached the 90-sol goal, and the team sent the rovers on more time-consuming journeys. Spirit was tasked with going to and exploring the Columbia Hills, and OPI was sent to the Endurance crater. While descending into this crater, OPI started to slip towards a large boulder, which if she hit could end her mission. OPI's driver took a risk and set her to autopilot, which came in clutch, with OPI missing the boulder by mere centimeters. After a quick stay in the Endurance crater, Opportunity headed for a long journey to the Victoria crater. On the way, her wheels became submerged in sand, but by going maximum speed in reverse, she managed to escape. During Spirit's long adventure through the Columbia Hills, her front right wheel broke. Spirit also took the first ever video of Mars in this time.
A while later, while still on her way to the Victoria crater, Oppie was met with a ginormous dust storm. She had to shut down many times while the storm passed to stay alive. Then, on Sol 1900, around 6 years into the mission, Spirit broke a second wheel while stuck in the sand. She sat in the sand, turning on and off, and needed to stay alive for nearly 300 sols, and eventually went quiet, sending her last transmission on Sol 2208. NASA officially ended her mission on May 25, 2011. While this is happening, Oppie starts to take her long trek to the huge Endeavour crater. On the several-year-long journey to the crater, Oppie is struck by lightning, which surprisingly has no major effect on the rover. She began to show signs of age, as well as breaking her right front wheel, the same wheel Spirit broke first. Oppie finally arrives at the crater, which she quickly starts to explore. Then, in maybe the most important part of the mission, the overachieving rover that was supposed to last 90 days, thousands of days into the mission, finds clay that has been affected by neutral pH water, which was the goal from the start. This clay gave definitive evidence that Mars was once capable of sustaining life. After spending many more sols in the Endeavour crater, Oppie is approaching Sol 5000, which is Oppie's team now made up of different new people than the start, decide to take another risk and use the last bit of life from Oppie's microscopic imaging arm to take a selfie. So she sent back 17 blurry images that were constructed in a cohesive picture. Oppie spent the next few sols roaming around the crater taking pictures of rocks until yet another large dust storm approached.
And on Sol 5111, Opportunity sends back one last message with a near black image. My battery is low and it's getting dark. No more is ever heard from the rover. NASA officially ends the MER mission after about a year of silence from the rover in 2019. The world mourns the death of Oppie. To this day, she has traveled the farthest of any Mars rover at 45 kilometers.
She and Spirit were so successful that NASA had to put 2 more rovers on Mars. One is called Curiosity. She has been wandering the red planet since 2012. She has a similar goal, not only to find where good water might have been, but also to find evidence of past microbial life in these areas. She is still operational and over 3,000 sols into her mission. The other rover's mission is called Mars 2020. This sent the Perseverance rover to Mars in 2020. Her goal is to find past or present life on Mars, as well as test new technologies that may benefit human civilizations on Mars in the future.
Thanks to these advances in technology and the information gathered about Mars, companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin have plans for people on Mars in the not-so-distant future, and 1 million people on the planet by 2050. Due to the fact that the MER mission ended so recently, we don't know how much of what was learned will be important, but what these rovers did discover could be vital for the future of human civilization.